This is the Gigabyte RTX 3080 Gaming OC, and it's one heck of a graphics card, as I'm sure you can imagine. It comes in at around $750 USD, or about $50 more than the Founders Edition model. Actually, you can't even buy this on NVIDIA's store anymore. You have to buy it exclusively at Best Buy, at least as of time of filming, which is interesting. But either way, we'll see how the Gaming OC stacks up, measure temps and sound along the way, and decide if it's actually worth $750. Stay with me. The Dark Power Pro 12 is the most efficient power supply Be Quiet's ever built, with its 80+ titanium rating, digital control, and frameless Silent Wings fan. A fully modular layout helps keep builds clean, and individually sleeved cables help keep things classy. And it's all packaged with Be Quiet's mammoth 10-year manufacturer warranty. Learn more about the Dark Power Pro 12 below. So the Gigabyte Gaming OC cards have traditionally been among the best cards you can buy, at least in the Gigabyte family, and that's aside from the Aorus models, which often include beefier heatsinks and overkill custom PCBs, although those typically are also a bit more expensive. This model ships with a 4-year manufacturer warranty, an 1800 MHz core clock, a standard dual 8-pin config, none of that weird adapter mess, and a dual BIOS for optional silent operation, though for our testing the switch was left in the default OC or overclock mode. You'll find 2 HDMI 2.1 ports at the rear, along with 3 DisplayPort 1.4a ports, good for up to 4 monitors running in tandem. The Gaming OC is also a pretty thick one, as you can see, and that's at least with respect to the Founders Edition card, which is a true, or more or less true, 2-slot card. This one here is more like a 3-slot card. It stands about 55 millimeters tall, meaning it will creep its way into that third PCI slot. It's also about 320 millimeters long, so it won't be compatible with some narrower cases. 3 fans will keep things nice and cool under load, and they will shut off at idle conditions. The only RGB on the card exists here behind the Gigabyte logo and can be controlled via RGB Fusion 2 software. So let's talk performance then. For testing, I paired a stock Core i9-9900KS from Intel with 16 gigs of Corsair DOM Plats at 3 GHz Cas15. A Shadowrock 3 from Be Quiet cooled the CPU, and a Corsair 4000D with its stock 2-fan config housed the components. Now, for all the tests you're about to see, the left side panel was on, with the exception of the sound test, where I just simply took off the left panel, stuck the sound meter there after things had toasted, pretty much equalized temperature-wise, so that the card didn't have a chance to cool down and thus run a bit quieter. And another important note, the 3 graphics cards you'll see tested in this video were all run at stock conditions. Again, the Gaming OC card was left in the default OC BIOS config. The NVIDIA driver used was 456.71, and the Gigabyte model never crashed to desktop, it never blue screened, it never outright failed a benchmark. I stressed the hell out of this thing. So I think the capacitor configuration issue is moot at this point. That's why we never published a video about it. I wanted to see if this could be mitigated via software, and it looks like it has been. Now, something I do think is worth bringing up right before we talk about the raw performance numbers with these cards: DLSS was enabled for all 3 of these cards because they all support DLSS. They all have Turing cores. And I feel like it's something that you can't really go without when testing in 4K, which all of these cards are capable of handling. It frees up computational power in the GPU for other tasks when DLSS is enabled. And that results in significant frame rate bumps for games that support it. And in my testing, at least DLSS 2.0, image quality was very impressive, and the frame rate bump as a result more than outweighs any minor image quality hit, and again, I noticed none of it when comparing them side by side. Now, obviously, since this feature requires the inclusion of ultra-fast tensor cores, again, DLSS, or Deep Learning Super Sampling, is only available on select Turing and Ampere models, meaning all AMD cards, lower-end NVIDIA cards, and NVIDIA cards reliant on Pascal or older architecture won't have this functionality, in which case both DLSS and non-DLSS runs of the same benchmark will be included for the sake of transparency. So first up were our temperature and sound tests using ID64 Engineer, which isn't a super heavy GPU load, but it is consistent. And stressing the GPUs for 30 minutes apiece, our Founders Edition model reached 76 degrees Celsius, while the Gaming OC managed a cool 65. This is a fairly significant delta and worth the $50 markup on its own, if you ask me. As for sound, using our meter, the FE card ran a tad louder, but the two were almost indistinguishable with the left side panel installed. The Gigabyte card had a slightly lower tone than the FE model. Coil whine, by the way, was indistinguishable under load as well. All this to say, the Gigabyte model ran significantly cooler and maintained a slightly quieter sound profile, likely thanks to its chubby heatsink and triple fan layout. So far, so good. Next, let's talk power. The gaming OC pulled only a few additional watts in my testing, upwards of 320 watts versus 3 or 5 or so for the FE model. And these measurements were taken under a superposition loop, which will heavily stress the GPU. And I measured temperatures via software. So consider slight variance here or there, but this is strictly GPU power draw that you're looking at. And I'd say this delta is unlikely to influence buyers one way or another. I suppose it makes sense to move on to superposition scoring then, where the gaming OC managed an impressive 14,825 in the 4K optimized preset versus the FE's 13,756. This accounts for an almost 8% increase in raw performance, a testament to the gaming OC's superior clock speed and beefy cooling solution, allowing said clocks to be held for longer durations, resulting in again a higher score. A similar story plays out in 3D Mark TimeSpy and TimeSpy Extreme. TimeSpy is a 1440p DX12 synthetic, while Extreme takes things a step further with 4K. And no matter how you slice it, the Gigabyte model commands, at least on paper, a statistically significant lead in the ballpark of around 2 to 3%. At this point, I should also mention the 2080 Super from EVJ that we threw in as a sort of baseline. This indicates how significant a leap Ampere is over Turing with respect to 80 series cards. The 2080 Super manages a graphics score in TimeSpy Extreme of only about 5,200, 5,300, what is essentially a 40 or so % decline in performance for around the same starting retail price. Now, of course, you can get the 2080 Super now in the used market for a lot less. Well, maybe not a lot less now, seeing as though Ampere is still being gouged, but maybe in the next few months it will be a bargain used. Up next is GTA 5, where both the FE and gaming OC RTX 3080s trade blows in the upper 130s on average in 4K high settings with a dab of anti-aliasing and no advanced settings. These cards are without a doubt 4K 120 capable with many titles, and it's about dang time. Mind you, the RTX 2080 Super does a fair job holding above 100 FPS in an identical setting. I should also note the 2080 Ti was a really great 4K 120 card. It just cost $1,200 or so new. And if you're watching this video in October 2020 thinking, well, Greg, you can't even find these RTX 3080s at MSRP, they're going on eBay for like twice of the list price. Yeah, this video is more for the long term when these cards we expect will become more prevalent in the market. I think that it will make a bit more sense to compare things then. By the way, that RTX 2080 pulling in just over 100 FPS is actually doing fairly well. Typically how this works is that synthetics reveal larger gaps in performance because they lack the optimization hurdles that many AAA titles encounter in development, which is why the 2080 Super appears to be a much better card in GTA 5's case than it does in say, 3D Mark. F1 2020 was up next, and I tested this in DX11 so that you could see raw side-by-side system usages in the 4K Ultra preset with DLSS enabled because it was an option with this game. These RTX 3080s are easily capable of 120 FPS or more despite our test rig being almost entirely GPU bound. Again, this is thanks in large part to DLSS. The gaming OC from Gigabyte was able to maintain slightly higher clocks thanks to its additional thermal headroom and squeaked out a tiny, albeit noticeable, at least on paper again, victory over the FE model. These differences are indistinguishable to the human eye, don't let anyone tell you otherwise, but you are objectively pulling a bit more out of your GPU with a more efficient cooling solution, and that's what the Gigabyte card offers. Next up was Shadow of the Tomb Raider, first in DX11 with DLSS enabled, running in the high preset. Now in 4K, where we'd expect these cards to be leveraged a bit more, both 3080s managed around 90 FPS, which isn't great, but this is just how Shadow works. While our 2080 Super pulls out a pretty compelling average frame rate of 74. But where Ampere really begins to stretch its legs is with ray tracing enabled, where frame rates only drop by 7% or so. Contrast this with the RTX 2080 Super, whose frame rates were cut by 22% under the same conditions. All three GPUs have dedicated RT and tensor cores, but Ampere's ray tracing overhead is noticeably lower here, again thanks to the help of DLSS 2.0, which frees up performance headroom for ray trace calculations. Ampere is objectively a better GPU, so it makes sense this would help the Ampere cards a bit more. Keep in mind, however, that all of this is very game and setting dependent, meaning your mileage will definitely vary. So all in all, the RTX 3080 Gaming OC from Gigabyte is solid and well worth the $50 markup if you ask me. Granted, very few of these are currently in stock as of time of filming, and a lot of these are going for like $1,200, $1,300 on eBay. Do not pay scalper prices for this card. Be patient. You don't need it that bad. I know your conscience is probably telling you do, but this card is definitely worth $750 given what you're able to squeak out of it. I mean, this is a better card than an RTX 2080 Ti that was launched, what, a year or two ago for $1,200 or so USD. An AIB card like this would have cost easily $1,200. So in that department, Ampere is awesome, and Gigabyte did a great job of this. I don't see any problems with it at all, really. Even the price, being it's only $50 over the Founders Edition model, which is not referenced, but still, it's kind of our benchmark for this video. I think that is a worthy trade-off. And again, I experienced nothing but absolute stability with the latest drivers, something I was keen to testing after reading about the whole capacitor issue. And I'm 100% willing to recommend this card, put my name behind it. I don't think you'll run into issues. At least I never did, and I put this card through a lot in a few days. Is it the quietest or fastest card? Probably not. Is it the cheapest? Definitely not. But for the relatively small AIB markup, I think it's awfully competitive and damn good at what it does. You can find relevant product links, including where to buy this, below if interested, and be sure to check out our promotional gear. How did I read that? Our production gear, a bit further down in the video description as well if you want to figure out kind of stuff we use to create videos like these. This is all for this video. If you guys like the video, you can... I'm screwing up the outro, but you know, click the standard stuff. Subscribe if you haven't already. I would appreciate that. I see a lot of you comment and aren't subscribed. If you click that subscribe button, it does mean a lot. It goes a long way. I know that subscriptions really don't have the same weight that they used to, but it does tell me that I'm at least doing something right. Your feedback, your direct feedback in the comments is also very appreciated. And just clicking the like button goes a long way. The bell's there. We have a Discord server. You should join that. That's below. Anything else? Nope, I don't think so. Now the wife's vacuuming. Told her I was filming. She decides to start vacuuming. Thank you guys for watching. My name is Greg. Thanks for learning with me.